For today's enhanced evaluation, I get to speak to somebody all the way from the place where Bugs Bunny should have made that left turn, Albuquerque, New Mexico. She is the doyenne of death. Please welcome Gail Rubin. Gail.
Hello, John. Great to be with you. Yes,
Great.
I was in a cemetery the other day, and it was like being in a cartoon because I saw a coyote and I saw a roadrunner.
Ah, okay, great. Wasn't a phoenix coyote, was it?
No.
Okay, great. Very first thing we need to start with is that nickname. Now, not everybody had the ability to take 10 years of French in high school like I did. So please explain the doyenne of death to my viewers.
Well, I pronounce it doyenne, and doyenne is a woman who's considered senior in a group who knows a lot about a particular subject. So as the doyenne of death, I can provide a lot of insights about planning ahead for end-of-life issues.
Okay. Well, doyenne, as we say here, is actually French for dean when it's a lady. But explain why you're the doyenne of death.
So I've written several books about planning ahead for end-of-life issues. A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, is a light touch on what many consider a dark subject. I also wrote Hail and Farewell, Cremation Ceremonies, Templates and Tips, and Kicking the Bucket List, 100 Downsizing and Organizing Things to Do Before You Die. Becoming the doyenne of death, I became a certified thanatologist, which is a fancy name for a death educator. And I use humor, film clips, outside the box activities to help get people to break down their resistance to talking about planning ahead for end-of-life issues. And many of my speeches are about that topic. And I do try to bring a light touch so people laugh, and laughing helps break down that resistance to talking about a very serious subject.
Absolutely, and I fully agree. And to bring everybody else up to speed as to why we know each other, I gave a speech years ago on some funeral topics, and a mutual friend of ours, TK O'Geary, happened to be in the audience. So she flagged me down and said, John, you're a funeral director. You have to meet my friend Gail. She's a thanatologist. And we hit it off fairly instantly. We've not yet met in person, but hopefully we can change that fairly soon. And I'll give a little extra something to the audience. You mentioned thanatology. When I was in funeral college, they defined thanatology as the study of life, but we left death in there.
Huh. Yes. In ADEC, the Association for Death Education and Counseling, it's defined as the study of death, dying, and bereavement. But I apply it towards, let's plan ahead for our 100% mortality rate.
Excellent. Anybody who can bring more light to end-of-life discussions as a funeral director, I am very happy. So when I had the idea for enhanced evaluations, I said, I need to do one with Gail, not just for your speaking skills, Gail, but because it's going to help me and you get this message out. So there's a lot more to talk about you later on, but I want to jump into the speech here. Normally at this point, I would ask for a bit of background on the speech, but I'm not going to do that because of the nature of the speech. It is for the Toastmasters International Speech Competition, which means all people get when they walk into that speech is immediately before you start talking, they will hear your name and the title. So Gail Rubin, be prepared, Gail Rubin. That's all the introduction people get. And really, the audience for this is anybody. Anybody can walk in there. This isn't a professional conference. People don't need a certain education or background in order to appreciate your speech. It is for anybody and everybody. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
And this is at the area level. For you non-Toastmasters, the competition has various brackets, and the area is the second level, so it's still pretty local.
Yes.
All right. Now, if you haven't had a chance to watch Gail's speech, I'm going to give you that opportunity now. If you're watching me on YouTube, then I'm going to pop up the link right there. Get a chance to watch that. We'll take a minute to let you watch it, and we'll be back to talk about it on the other side. We're back. I hope you enjoyed watching Gail's speech. And before we get into the evaluation, I'd like to tell you a bit about what enhanced evaluations are. What you are about to experience is very different from the typical speech evaluations you are likely used to. This is an enhanced evaluation. Typical speech evaluations often take the form of a sandwich. That is, the evaluator opens by saying something good the speaker did. The evaluator closes by saying something good the speaker did. And then somewhere in the middle, the evaluator slips in what we like to call a growth point. Sandwich evaluations are excellent for novice speakers because novice speakers lack both the speaking skills and the confidence, and they need both their speaking skills and their confidence elevated. However, this is an enhanced evaluation, and we do not serve sandwiches here. If you are getting an enhanced evaluation from me, that means you are an established speaker and you have conquered stage fright. You are now focused on improving your speaking skills and improving your speech. Therefore, I am not worried about scarring your confidence or scaring you away from the stage. I only have two goals: improve your speaking skills and improve this speech you're doing. I understand that this could give the impression that I'm negative or harsh. That's not correct. If you do something good, I will tell you it was good. However, just like it's your wish that you improve, it's my wish that you improve. Every comment I make is based on your performance, not you as a person. My intent is not to tear you down, but to inspire you to greater things. So don't take it personal, make it personal. As I do the evaluation, I'm going to break things into three headings. The overall visual, so that's your framing and all kinds of things that we see as soon as you show up. I'm going to talk about your content and your structure a little bit, and then we'll finish off with quick hits, little things that you said that I would recommend you improve. Like, don't say dog, say German Shepherd. I think that will resonate with the audience a little more, that kind of thing. So we will start with the visual, and the one thing people are going to point out right away is the framing is odd. Right? They're going to say there are parts where your head is cut off, where your arm goes off the screen, and you're not standing right in the middle. But there is a very good reason for that. The device you were speaking on, so this one right here, say, is this the one where the audience saw you in the competition and you had a separate device to actually record you? Or is it all, we're all talking about one device?
A separate device.
Okay, so your separate device was kind of off to the side. And that's the one that recorded you, but this is the one that the audience saw. So that would explain why things may have been a little bit offset. So we're going to assume the audience saw the properly framed version of you. And what we saw in the recording is like somebody sitting off there. So we're going to just assume everything is great. So I'm not going to talk about your framing at all. But what I am going to talk about is the overall appearance. And it was stupendous. Okay? You had a very dark background and you were an excellent contrast. You were well lit. The light picked up your facials. It picked up your gestures. You had a very light blouse on, which helped you stand out from the background. As far as your visual presentation goes, A+, I do not have a bad thing to say about it. You crushed that one. So moving on to the content. There's one thing you do very well, and I'm going to say even better than most people I saw. Now, do you know the dramatic principle of Chekhov's gun?
No, I don't.
Okay, so Russian playwright and short story writer Anton Chekhov had this principle. Now, I don't know how he said it in Russian and how many translations it's gone through to get to English, but it goes something like this. If you have a play and in the first scene, you show a rifle hanging on the wall, that rifle needs to go off before the end of the play. Everything in your play has to be there for a reason. Everything in your story has to be there for a reason. And you did an excellent job of that. The things you had in your speech were all there for a reason. You mentioned Gary was a musician, but later on, the fact that he was a musician came up. You also mentioned kind of a funny throwaway line about poisoning pigeons in the park. You'd think that's just a very quick joke, but it came up later when you talked about his memorial service. So everything you did was there for a purpose, although with one exception. And that is quite possibly the most important one, your opening. Your opening is so important. It's how you grab hold of the audience. And when you did your opening, you talked about COVID.
Perhaps you've noticed over these past 2 pandemic years that the shadow of death and grief has touched many of us. I saw a billboard for a local funeral home. It read, "Good grief comes with instructions. Pre-plan."
I understand the urge, or sort of the temptation to talk about COVID. It's very timely. It's what everybody is thinking of. But the thing is, you don't talk about COVID later on. You do introduce the idea of death, how it's on people's minds, but then you jump into that funeral billboard, the funeral home billboard you had. And that is where I would recommend you start. Start with, I saw a billboard that said, from the funeral home. Because later on, when you end your speech, you actually close by talking about the billboard.
Good grief comes with instructions.
So the billboard forms excellent bookends for your speech. I would say start with the billboard, end with the billboard, take the part about COVID out entirely. Any questions there?
Sounds like a good suggestion.
Okay. The other thing I like is about Gary. Now, Gary is the protagonist in the story. He's the main character, but you can do more to make him the hero. The main character of a story isn't always the hero. You can do things to make him more lovable, make the audience really like Gary. You tell a couple of stories, which are nice. Gary took me out every other week, and he always picked up the check. That's the kind of guy Gary was. With that little line, you make us know that Gary was a great guy. And you talk about him being a teacher. Now, generally, people love their good teachers. We don't love every teacher, but we love our good teachers. So when you can give us a bit of a story about one of the great things Gary did. Maybe he really went above and beyond with a student of his and helped that student achieve something great, and that student owes a great debt to Gary. So you can say Gary did ABC. He didn't have to, but that's the kind of guy Gary was. So then that becomes a little thread all the way through. That's the kind of guy Gary was. So when you get to the ultimate good deed that Gary did, quite literally the ultimate good deed, he pre-planned his funeral. That was an act of kindness to you, to a lot of people, but that's the kind of guy Gary was. Now, by this point, you've spent about 4 minutes making us like and letting us get to know who Gary was. So by this point, we're emotionally invested in Gary, and you can say, that's the kind of guy Gary was. And now you can hit the audience with, be like Gary. Go do likewise for your loved ones. Be the kind of guy Gary was. Now, by doing that, we get invested in Gary. He becomes more than just the central character. He becomes the hero. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Gary was very modest too, and he would probably say, he wouldn't want to be the hero, but yeah, he was such a nice guy. And in fact, when we did the memorial service, several of his students came and shared that he gave them his home phone number so they could call him at any time. So yeah, that would be a great detail.
And that's the kind of guy Gary was.
Yeah.
See, just by you telling me that, I like Gary a little bit more, even though I never met him. Now, speaking of Gary, I want to talk a little bit about names. When you name somebody in a speech, you make that person important. So when you don't name somebody, you make that person a little less important. They're kind of a background character. And there are only 2 people in this speech who need to be named. One is Gary, and the other is Gail, because you're delivering the speech. So everybody else in the speech doesn't need a name. I know your husband is Dave and you want to give him a shout out, but you can just call him my husband. My husband joined us. And you can say, Gary left instructions for his sister or his gaming buddies. That way, it puts more of a focus on the 2 people. Now, on Gary, really. And the only time people need to know your name is when you're reading his wishes and you say, and I know I can't stop Gail from doing a memorial service, but there's really not much I can do from beyond, or however you put it. So there's really, the only time people need to know who Gail is to know that you're that person that he cited. So
I
Gary's,
like that point to myself gesture. Do you think that'd be a good addition?
I think because now you're saying
Yeah.
who Gail is. People
Yeah.
will likely remember. Some people might remember who Gail is from your introduction, but you say, Gail's going to do this, and I can't stop her. So that's a way to, I hate to say diminish the other people, because they're not unimportant in life, but they are unimportant to the story. They can be background characters. Gary's the most important character, and because you are delivering the speech, you are an important character as well. So that about does it for names. There is one more thing I want to talk about with respect to content, and that is the emotional high point of this story, your discovery of Gary. And you can really bring a lot more emotion to that if you have some shorter sentences, big pauses, and a bit of repetition. So it's the day you discovered Gary. I called him to find out what kind of cheese he would like. Or you can even mimic it. I called him to see what kind of cheese he would like. No answer. So we went to his house, his apartment, knocked on the door. No answer. Well, luckily I have a spare key. I opened it, opened the door, stuck my head inside. Gary, it's me, Gail. No answer. So I walked in, looked for him in his favorite chair. He's not there. So you can feel the sense of foreboding people have, and people already know Gary's not with us. So this is confirming that. So I followed the oxygen tube into the bathroom where it ended, and there was Gary. Curled up on the tile floor, no pulse, room temperature. And I would even remove the line quite dead. Just end with room temperature and then sell your own emotion there. There he was, no pulse, room temperature. Let that hang. Let the audience who has just gotten to know Gary for the last 4 minutes feel your grief and your shock at that moment. So that's what I would do. Repetition, pauses, and then let it hang out there with that big pause. And then you make the transition into the funeral planning and what great things Gary did with that letter of his. Before I move on, do you have any questions on that?
No, that sounds great. I mean, I got emotional just watching you do it.
And you're the one who actually knows Gary. So
Yeah.
Imagine what that's going to do to the people who just got to know him and are now experiencing it for the first time. Like, don't just tell people that you were shocked. Invite them into your world at that time. Let them feel it. So now we're going to get into our quick hits, just very, very short things, no particular heading. And I want to start with Gary's letter that he wrote, his final wishes. What did you call it? Upon my demise, was that it?
Upon my death.
Upon my death. So you do hold up that letter. I don't know if that's the real letter Gary wrote or not, but the audience doesn't know that, and they're going to assume it is. A way to get that across better is to get a big title page with big letters, upon my death, so the audience can read it. Props have an amazing way of turning the theoretical in the mind of the audience to the tangible. So when you say, upon my death, this is the letter Gary wrote. So then when you reach for it later in the speech, after Gary's discovery, they know exactly what you're talking about. It doesn't look like just another piece of paper. The audience knows you're talking about Gary's letter. Then you can flip it up and read, or at least pretend to read, what Gary happened to write in his final wishes. Another thing is, he talked about the song he played, and I referenced it earlier, the Poisoning Pigeons in the Park. You said he was able to play Poisoning Pigeons in the Park by heart. Now, it's kind of odd you asked a Canadian to do this, because when I was growing up in the 80s, Heart was a band. So when you say Poisoning Pigeons in the Park by Heart, I think he's playing a song performed by Heart. Now, there's a very weird reason I know Heart. They, through a weird regulatory problem, they got a lot of radio play in Canada during the 80s. I can explain that to you maybe a little bit later on. But so when you say by heart, I immediately think of the band. You actually don't need to say he could play it by heart. But if you want to get across the idea that he didn't need sheet music to do this, you can say he could play Tom Lehrer's Poisoning Pigeons in the Park completely from memory. So that's one way to do it. But the part about heart is a little bit ambiguous. Could mean different things to different people.
Or I could say he could spontaneously play Poisoning Pigeons in the Park.
I'm not sure spontaneously is the right word, because that sounds like it came from nothing. He could do it on demand. Is not bad.
Okay.
From memory, he could play it on demand. Actually, on demand is not bad. I could see that happening. Right?
Okay.
Another thing is when you talk about his strategy gaming night, you talked about how he would have gaming night with the boys, and you would put the scare quotes there.
Routines. Monday and Thursdays was strategy gaming night with the boys.
When you do that, it seems like you're implying something. And I don't know what I'm supposed to conclude from that. So you can simply say he did strategy gaming night with his buddies, strategy gaming night with the guys, with the boys. But as soon as you do this, you make the audience think there's something you're not saying, and then we start to wonder what you're not saying. And I'm guessing you don't mean anything weird by it, right?
No.
No, so just say he was doing his strategy gaming nights with the boys or with the guys,
and
with his buddies.
I guess I did that because that's what he called them, the boys. So
the boys.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that was the name of his team or something like that.
No, it wasn't a team. It was just a group of guys that would get together and do strategy games. So.
Okay. But I could see somebody naming their team the boys, because when I was doing dragon boating a little while ago, we named our team those guys, purely so people could say, hey, those guys were pretty fast. The problem is those guys were not very fast. We came fourth in the lowest tier, but that's we can talk about my lack of athletic abilities another day. So that is what I had as far as your visual, your content / structure, and some very quick hits, individual wording things. Is there something you'd like to clarify?
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay, then that brings us almost to the end, but as a thank you, I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell the audience what you're up to and what you're doing. So this is a segment I like to call Go Plug Yourself. So this is your opportunity to tell people your website, your Twitter handle. You can hold up your books again, and I'm going to step away entirely. I'm even going to mute my microphone to ensure I don't steal the focus by accident. So Gail Rubin, whenever you're ready, go plug yourself.
Thank you, John. Yes, as we've discussed, I am the doyen of death. So I am a pioneering death educator. In addition to my books, the first one was A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, an award-winning book. Other award-winning book, Kicking the Bucket List, 100 Downsizing and Organizing Things to Do Before You Die. And Hail and Farewell, Cremation Ceremonies, Templates, and Tips. Very important given the rise of cremation in North America over the past few years. It gives you guidance on what you can do with cremated remains and how to put together a good service that is meaningful for people. I also am the coordinator of the Before I Die New Mexico Festival. I've held that for 5 years in a row, and death discussion movements are gaining ground in our society these days. So this year I am working on a Before I Die Festival in a Box, a manual about how to create a one-day or multi-day event that people can come and learn about what they need to do before there's a death in the family. Make it fun. We put the fun in funeral planning, and also get them to take action, because despite great advances in medical care, we do have a 100% mortality rate, yet less than 30% of adults do any end of life planning, and it doesn't have to be that way. And my website for all of this great information is agoodgoodbye.com. I do have other websites, gailrubin.com for the Before I Die Festival, beforeiddiefestivals.com. But agoodgoodbye.com is a great place to start.
Gail, thank you very much for furthering end-of-life discussions and removing the stigma around death discussions. And thank you very much for the honor of allowing me to give you an enhanced evaluation today.
Thank you for a wonderful evaluation. It will greatly improve the speech.
I hope you enjoyed that enhanced evaluation, and I hope you picked up a few tips and tricks to make you a better speaker in the future. Would you like one of your speeches to be enhanced evaluated? Contact me and we'll make that happen. How do you contact me? My contact information is on my website. That's lastrites.com, last-writes.com. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you will be made aware of these new enhanced evaluation videos as they become available. And together we, that's you and I, we will lay boring speeches to rest by giving them the last rites.
We can talk about my lack of athletic abilities another day.